Well, hey, friends, how's it going? Let's go live. All right, here we go. We are live. Welcome to Live at 5. Glad to have you. I am here. How are you guys doing? Hit me a note. Say hi. Where are you watching from? Say hi. Drop a comment. If you're watching right now, share it. Share this with a friend. I think we got some fun things to talk about. I see Amy online. Hi, Amy. Hi, Melinda De Roche. How are you? Good to see you guys online. So if you are watching right now, Madeline, one of my favorite people in the face of the planet, Miss Madeline Splon, Christina Lee, good to see you. Elisha, hey friends, glad to have you tuning in. Welcome to Live at 5 on a Wednesday. We're going to be moving Live at 5 from Tuesdays and Thursdays now to Wednesdays, partly because, and I'll explain this in a little bit, partly because I want to start creating the culture of one type of discipleship moment for us at Journey Church in Redmond. I know many of you do not attend or are not a part of Journey Church Redmond, at least in person. But one of the things that we're looking towards doing is getting into the rhythms of something, whether it be online or in person, of a discipleship experience. And so I'm going to start transitioning this actually more than likely in the next few weeks. Depending on what's going on, and we'll discuss that, to maybe even an in-person live at 5. And so we're kind of looking at something like that. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being a part. I know many of you watch this later on, so if you're watching this afterwards, thanks for taking the time to watch. I know that God's got some great things in store for us, and I'm excited for that. I see lots of people. I see Janelle. Hey, Janelle, good to see you guys again. They had Janelle and Alex Nava live in Salem. They came and visit us on Saturday last week on a beautiful day here in Central Oregon. Got to float the river for the first time. Super fun. That's like the thing to do. Well, I wanted to just say hi and jump online. And I want to talk a little bit about what we talked about here at Journey Church, the Journey family of churches this last week. And Keith taught a great message about God's timings and the miracles of tomorrow and waiting in the process of that. And I'm excited for even what we're talking about this coming Sunday. I'm preaching this Sunday at the Journey family of churches and just continuing on the subject of the sermon you need to hear. But I wanted to look at this just for a moment, even in light of what's going on with our lives, and I say ours isn't collectively, yours and mine, because I know many of you are watching either from Oregon or from California. And in general, the last 2 weeks have been somewhat surreal in California shutting down, Oregon going to, mandatory face masks, and just the dynamics of constant change once again. For me, the month of May, the month of June, at least felt somewhat consistent because everything was shut down. So at least you kind of knew what it was going to be. But now we're kind of coming back into this reopening process. And we're back into that, like learning how to be flexible and pivot with every day, because it seems like every day something new comes out, some new stat or some new news article. And just kind of learning once again to navigate these uncertain times. I was... the last couple of weeks have been tough. We had some family come and visit, and now they've all made it public, so I can talk about it. But we had some family come and visit, and one of those were my parents, and they wanted to come and see our baby, and for the first time meet their grandchild, and they weren't feeling well. And because they weren't feeling well, they went and got tested for coronavirus while they were on the coast. They were driving in their RV, and sure enough, they're positive. And so they were here in Redmond staying in their RV. We kind of kept our distance. Well, we kept our distance. We wouldn't go around them. And, so it was just a surreal moment of, hey, holding our child up, from 10 feet away while my parents are standing behind glass saying, here's your grandchild, and then them driving home because they were coronavirus positive. And just the world we live in of just, is this the reality of life? Next week is a nephew's wedding, and I know one of my sibling, and she also has it, and she was potentially facing the reality of not even being at her own son's wedding because of coronavirus. And this world is just crazy, and these times are crazy. And I was standing at lunch the other day. Everybody had to wear face masks, and just kind of talking to somebody saying, I cannot believe this is the world we're living in this moment. I think we all thought by now we'd have this figured out and that everything would be back to normal. Did anybody else feel that way? And now all of a sudden here we are still uncertain of the future of what the day holds. And I was thinking about what Pastor Keith talked about, and if you didn't watch Journey Family of Church's Sunday message, that's totally fine, but it's a story, and I'll summarize it for you in the book of 2 Kings. And there's a story of these kings that have allied with the nation of Edom to go to war over a trade dispute. That's basically the gist of the message. And based on the trade dispute, they decide to go to war. And as they go to war, they make this march out into the wilderness, the eastern part of Jerusalem, or the eastern part of Israel, as we would know it today. I've been there 3 times. It is one of the driest places on earth. This is where the Dead Sea is, the lowest place on earth. It's about 1,200 feet below sea level. And they go out and they march against this nation. And as they do, the Bible tells us that they do this. It's a weird word. I was super confused by this. It's a circuitous, I can't even pronounce it. Circle march. They marched in circles for 7 days in the wilderness. And in marching for 7 days in the wilderness, they ran out of water, to the point where they couldn't water their livestock, to the point where their soldiers had no more water. And this is a really bad situation to be in. When you are out in the wilderness and you are about to go to war and you have no water and you are dehydrated, you are basically good for nothing. So they call the prophets to them, and they can't find any good news. And so they call Elisha, who is a prophet, and Elisha comes and says, well, why don't you just do what you were doing? Obviously, you didn't need my opinion. You didn't need my perspective. So go do that. And they, we're sorry. We did it wrong. And so Elisha calls for a musician, and he asks for that presence to come in. And there in that moment, he seeks after God. And God says, tomorrow this valley will be filled with water. You will not see or hear the sound of rain, but surely this is a small thing for me. The story goes on that at night there was a rain somewhere out in the country where they were at, and that flash flooded into the valley, and there was enough water for them to feed their livestock, to dehydrate or rehydrate, as well as, in addition to that, the Edomite army came, the Moabite army came, and they saw the water early in the morning with the sun reflecting on that with red, and they thought it was blood. So they thought they had won. So they came in with this pomp and circumstance, not realizing that they were actually walking into 3 armies that would defeat them. And so all of what God said came into pass. And so that's the whole story. And the gist of the story is that you don't sometimes see what God is up to. And in the story, God says, tomorrow this valley will be filled with water, but you won't see rain. You won't hear it. You won't even know that it's coming, but it will happen. And I was thinking, in light of just how inconsistent this time is, and how each and every one of us are in the season of making decisions and then having to learn how to become fluid with our plans, with our dreams, with our hopes, with all of the different things that we've planned. It's sometimes we feel like God spoke something into our lives, but yet we're not seeing it. And I just want to encourage you to not go, I talked about this last week, to not base our lives solely upon what we are seeing in the moment. I look at my own life, like as a church planter, we had 3 weeks at Journey Church Redmond. Come on, somebody, if you were there for one of those 3 weeks, give me a hello. And we had 3 weeks in person, and then coronavirus shut us down. And I cannot tell you how many times through the last 4 months that we have questioned, God, was this what we were supposed to have done? I mean, is this it? You called us here to plant a church, and we planted a church, and then it got shut down. Like, what's the deal with that? And just dealing with that or mitigating that is so often we want to go through life with what we see. We want to go through life with the consistency and the foundations of the things that we have. And we make plans to the best of our knowledge. And not always are those plans great. Not always are those plans right. Not always are those plans exactly how God wants things to unfold. Now, I'm not saying that about Journey Redmond. But what I'm saying is, if you look at this story and you look at where we're at, that many of us have made plans, and many of us are looking down the barrel of inconsistency, wondering what on earth will tomorrow bring. And my encouragement to you, my encouragement to me, is that God is faithful. I love this. God tells Elisha to tell them, this is not a big deal for me. To bring rain to you, or to bring water to you, even though you won't see the rain or you won't hear the rain, to bring rain and to provide for you, and listen to this, even when you've made a bad decision, it's not a big deal for me to do this. And that leads me to the reality of resting in the grace of God. And grace is many people have defined this in so many different ways. Grace is the unmerited favor of God, or it's, my parents used to say it like this. Grace is God's sovereign divine ability to get the job done on our behalf when we can't do it. If you're watching from The Rock, come on, you know that. And that's exactly what's going on in this season. I don't know about you, but I have spent 4 months, and I've talked about this probably countless times on these Live at 5 experiences, 4 months trying my hardest to make something work. How are we going to make in-person gatherings work? How are we going to revitalize or relaunch or restart Journey Church Redmond? What are we going to do with our own lives? And how is it you're probably thinking the same thing. How do we get back to the way it was? And so I'm spinning my wheels and I'm spinning my emotional and mental energy trying to figure all of this out. And if there's one thing I have learned in these 4 months, and I'd say I have not learned this as a lesson like incomplete, this is one thing that God is continually teaching me is to rest in God's grace, his unmerited favor. The fact is that, like this story, like whatever you're experiencing, like what we're walking through, that God is going before you right now. You don't know what tomorrow holds. I love the story. You don't see the rain. You don't hear it, but tomorrow the valley will be full of water. That's the story of 2 Kings 3. Is that God is going before you. God is going before me and working out things towards our benefit. That's what Romans chapter 8 says, that all things work to the good of those who are called who love God and who are called according to his purpose. But how often do we not rest in the grace of God? Like, I didn't notice this part of the story, but they went out to the wilderness. They wanted to be first to the battle scene, so they went 7 days early to the battle, and they marched in circles without water. This is a really dumb thing to do. And I know that I've made some bad choices. I know that you've probably made some things that you wish you wouldn't have done also. But I love the fact that God's grace is always there. That God is a God of grace. Jesus Christ himself in John chapter 1 is full of grace and truth. So often we want to just talk about truth, and truth is so important because it is the foundation of everything. But truth without grace is mean. Sometimes we talk just about grace, like, hey, God is only grace. Grace without truth is meaningless, but grace and truth together. That is, God's grace is there with us, but at the same time, we need to learn to live in it is medicine. And my encouragement for you today as we start this habit of diving in together on Wednesdays for Live at 5 is to lean into the grace of God. Where in your life, let me just ask you this question, and if there's anything else for today, I want you to do this for the week. Where this week are you not leaning into God's grace in your life? Where are you trying to make something happen that you need to let God make happen? Where are you trying to force something in your life that you need to allow God to go before you? Like Elisha says, he says these words, well, what have I to do with you? Go to the prophets of your father and the prophets of your mother. But the king of Israel said, no, it's the Lord who called these 3 things to give them into the hand of Moab. And Elisha says, as the Lord of hosts, whom I stead stands, if it wasn't for Jehoshaphat, the good king, I wouldn't do anything. When we go to God, when we give it to God, when we rest in the grace and the power and in the presence of God, then that's when God goes before us. And we're going to talk about that this weekend at Journey Church. I'm going to be preaching, and it's a sermon you need to hear. I'm talking about when you're disappointed with God. And I don't know about you, there have been times in my life where I have been grossly disappointed with the way things turned out and have turned that over to God. Why weren't you there in the moment? But when we learn to lean into the grace of God, when we learn to lean into the power of God and let God be God, and we find rest in that, then all of a sudden things start to happen in our lives. And that's my encouragement for you. Jesus says these words. He says, come to me all who are weary and need rest. And then he says these words. He says, take my yoke upon you, for my burden is easy and my yoke is light. A yoke has nothing to do with rest. A yoke is a symbol of work. But what Jesus is saying is that you who are tired, you're exhausted from doing life your way, Take my way of life, my system, my yoke, my work upon you, and you will find a better way to live. And that is a way of rest. Rest in knowing that you are doing this not alone, but with God. I just want to encourage you. I don't know, maybe you feel like you're at the bottom. Maybe you feel like you're at the end of your rope. I don't know where you are. If you're watching this live, you could say, like Luisa says, amen. Or if you're watching this next week, I just want you to know God is with you. God is going before you. But I want to encourage you to look into your life this week and ask yourself, where do I need to lean into God's grace and let God be God in my life? And let's see where God takes us in that. I'm really looking forward to the future of Live at 5. As I said, we're going to be developing these into something a little bit more. A lot of people with Journey in Redmond in particular have been asking, when are we going to be meeting in person? And, the reality is that we are still grappling with this question. As week to week changes, as we look at mask orders, as we look at location difficulties and technicalities, as we look at all of these different things, as we look at California rolling back, and is that going to happen here in Oregon? We're definitely wrestling and grappling with these. And I think, if anything, exactly this, resting in the grace of God. As a pastor, I want to get back to what was. I want to get Journey Redmond going. I want to grind this out. Let's do this in person. Forget it. But at the same time, I believe that God is also giving us a season to pull back and to evaluate. What are we doing? How are we creating disciples? How are we developing our own lives? I mean, many of us, like you feel in the same way as I were, feeling the vacuum of what church did in our lives, and it's either pulling us away or drawing us closer to Jesus. And I think God is filling this moment right now with grace. And so, the truth is, we don't know even yet the plan for in-person gatherings. That we were supposed to start last week, but we pumped the brakes on that, and we're looking maybe at the end of the month doing Wednesday night Bible studies in person and online together. Now, with everything that's going, that may not be an option. We don't know. And that frustrates me. And I think it frustrates you. And that's where I say, if I'm asking you to ask God, where do you need to lean in the grace of God? I'll just tell you, that's where I need to lean into the grace of God. God, I need you to lead me as a leader into making the right and the wise and the best decision for this moment, so that I don't go marching in the wilderness for 7 days without water. And God doesn't want you to do that either. So let's, friends, learn to lean into and rest in God's grace, because God is there. God goes before you. God goes before me, and He is at work. You may not see it. You may not hear it. You may not even experience it in this moment, but God is working, and I love it. This is no big thing for me. Well, hey, friends. That's it for Live at 5 today at Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to this rambling man rambling on. But I just so appreciate our time together. It's good to see some of your names and your comments. Thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you again at our next Live at 5 next week on Wednesday. Join us this Sunday at the Journey Family of Churches online Sunday experience. I'll be teaching on the sermon you need to hear, and when you are disappointed with God, what do you do with that? We're going to talk about it this Sunday. I believe that God's going to speak some great things into your life. Friends, thank you so much for being with me today. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.